A warning. This podcast discusses abuse involving children. Listener discretion is advised. The native black hunting wasp is small but mighty, paralysing its prey with a single sting. And there's a reason why Simon Peterson and his team have chosen it as their mascot. Because like the wasp, they hunt spiders.
Spiders in our space is sort of a colloquial representation of a child sex predator.
The Child Exploitation Operations Team deal with the worst of the worst.
I think if people knew how prevalent it was, they would be overwhelmed.
You're frequently confronted by stuff you couldn't even conceive of.
And there's one question they get asked more than any. How do you do it?
And that's always a tricky question to answer, because I don't think many people can really tell you how they do it. I think we know why we do it. We're all motivated because it's the right thing to do.
I'm Davina Zimmer, and today on The Detail, the growing issue of child exploitation and the team dedicating their lives to stamping out the issue. I sat down with Chief Customs Officer Simon Peterson to talk about his job.
Our job is to investigate the movement of child sexual exploitation material. I'm going to call that CSEM from now on because it's too long to just say the whole word out. So our team investigates the movement of CSEM across our borders, whether it's being imported or exported. We obviously work in a bigger ecosystem with other agencies, with the police and the Department of Internal Affairs, who each look at different parts of the CSEM problem. But we're very focused on people who are moving that material across our borders.
When you say material, what kind of material are we talking about?
So the material itself is publications. So it's videos, it's imagery, it's anything that could be defined as a publication which promotes or supports the sexual exploitation of children. Additionally, for customs, we look at other things like childlike sex dolls.
Border officials are calling for stronger laws to seize childlike sex dolls. There have been 7 border seizures and 4 post-border seizures of the high-tech dolls since 2017. Almost 50 full and part dolls were seized nationally by the Australia Border Force during the past 12 months alone.
Anything that would kind of encourage the sexual exploitation of children, where it touches the border, that's where my staff will do investigations.
It's no longer a matter of catching offenders at airport arrival gates. The rise of technology and digital content is confronting Simon and his team with a new border.
When we started doing air travel back in the mid-1900s, that was a new border that customs had to kind of respond to. We had to deal with planes and not just ships anymore. So this is sort of a new border for us. There are things that happen in the internet. There are things that cross what we call our cyber border, which is basically a point in New Zealand to a point outside New Zealand, which involves the internet, and we need to be across that as well. We all know that a lot of the CSEM transactions, I suppose, have moved online in the last couple of decades, so most of our work is actually around the cyber border. It's based online, it's based on what people in New Zealand are doing or how they're interacting with people overseas using the internet.
How do you catch people if it's online?
How long is a piece of string? There's a lot of different ways that we can catch someone. We rely a bit on industry reporting. So industry are keeping an eye out for this sort of material on their platforms, and they do report it. The main channel that we get is through the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children, which is US-based. It's an NGO over there. They have federal statute in the United States around companies like Google, Facebook or Meta, any social media platform that is based in the US is required to report any CSAM that it finds. Those generate reports that then go out across the world. I think we're at something like 16,000 this year to New Zealand. And when they get here, police, customs, DIA all sit together every day, triage the reports that come through, and decide which agencies should be getting what, and then they filter down into eventually being assigned as an investigation if it's a priority. And that will generate some leads for us when it's involving New Zealand people. There are a few different ways that we can identify that this activity is happening across our cyber border. We obviously talk to partner agencies locally, internationally. They'll have leads that they share and vice versa. There's activities that can be done online that can reveal these sorts of behaviours when they become of interest to customs because they're crossing the border, that's when they'll either be referred to us or we'll pick them up and investigate them.
This year alone, Simon's team has arrested 13 people specifically for border-related offending, where culprits were found with exploitative material featuring children. But Simon is quick to point out they don't work alone.
Customs cannot deal with this alone. No agency can deal with this alone. We clip into a lot of other agencies like OT and other groups of people domestically as well to help us. It takes all of us to do this. Everyone can do something, whether it's schools, looking at education programs, or being bold and addressing problems that people don't normally want to talk about. It's a problem that we all kind of have to deal with as a society, not just say, well, can you just deal with that?
Has the distribution, the publication, the creation of child sexual abuse material, has it gotten worse?
The numbers keep going up. So if that is a metric to say it's getting worse, yes, the numbers keep increasing in terms of the numbers of reports that we're getting from industry, the number of investigations we do, the number of people we arrest, the amount of material that we seize off people that we've arrested is increasing. Additionally, the type of material that we're seeing or seizing is getting more and more violent and abusive. So that may be a metric that it's getting worse. The use of technology to do new stuff, with the generative AI, just creates more content. It creates more pathways for people to explore who are into that sort of thing.
Fake nude images of real teen and preteen girls have been circulated in social media chats.
The files found were at the more explicit end of the...
These are real children. Their abuse is being captured and shared.
It's quite anonymous.
Not many people know about what Simon and his team do. The documentary Unmasking Monsters, released earlier this year, was the first time the team let cameras behind the scenes for an inside look.
They can just hide in plain sight.
80% of people who collect child sex abuse material could also be hands-on abusing children and recording it.
The scale of this type of offending is mind-boggling.
What drives these offenders?
So I'm not a psych. What I have seen, though, is a range of pure adolescent stupidity. They just don't understand what they're doing, don't understand the consequences, through to paedophilic tendency where it is their way of life and nothing we're going to do is going to change that. And it's the whole range in between. There's thrill seekers in there who just are into everything. There is some quite alarming new content in the hybridised threat space, which is the sort of violent extremism plus CSEM. This is where groups of people who online groom or encourage young people to generate CSEM of themselves or do other violent things to themselves for their own gratification. So there's a lot of different motivations. It's quite individual. In terms of sharing, that can be simply a matter of birds of a feather online. They haven't had opportunities to talk to people before in the past. Now they can quickly find people that share what they like and they can connect with them very quickly and very quickly be sharing a lot of material.
Yeah, I think that we tend to, and I say we very broadly generalising as a society, tend to have this idea of what an offender might, like a stereotype of them. Being in the job, is there a stereotype?
More and more it's anyone. It is still stereotypically male. So it is a very male-dominated crime type, but we have seen more and more females involved in recent years. But in terms of who is a male, it used to be an easy profile is the dirty old white man who'd just been to Southeast Asia for customs. That was easy. But it's not anymore. It's teenagers right through to granddads. And all professions too. So it's not... It's one of those kind of scary things about it is that it can be a medical professional right through to someone with, a long criminal history.
It's pretty confronting for New Zealanders listening to this to learn that it could be anyone. What advice would you give to parents, especially, navigating this space and protecting their kids?
There's a lot of advice to give. And I don't want to be alarmist. We don't want people going around thinking, double-guessing every man out there. That wouldn't be helpful. But one thing we have seen a couple of times is at the end of cases, parents kind of connecting the dots and saying, I knew there was something wrong. and for whatever reason justified not doing anything about it. And I think that's something we've talked about a lot in the past is parents listening to their gut, not being afraid to explore something that doesn't feel right. If their kid's saying something or doing something, it's your kid. Protect them. Don't be afraid to explore that and see if there is something more there. There's actually a ton of resources available online to help with that process, especially with kids who are engaged online, who are playing games online. There's a lot of stuff coming out now around how to be safe around doing that. And I think my biggest thing as a parent would be to say to other parents, be engaged in what your kids are doing.
In December 2020, a Northland man pleaded guilty to over 70 charges of child exploitation. He was found to not only be in possession of child sexual abuse material, but also guilty of physical offending against children.
That came from basically nothing. It came from a single report that had 2 images in it. And these days, sadly, that would probably be not a prioritised investigation because there's just not much there. But it was picked up then and it resulted in a search warrant against the offender. We arrested him for exporting objectionable publications. And then once we were doing the forensic analysis of his devices that we'd seized from his address, we uncovered 5 or 6 New Zealand children that he'd been abusing and taking videos and images of. So that kicked in a whole process, Task Force Ruru process, which is a group between Customs, DIA and the police, victim identification group. They stood up and I was part of that over, I think it was 7 days straight. Managed to identify all of those kids just from folders with first names and ages on them. That ended up being a joint prosecution essentially with the police. Yeah, it was really good for the team because that's what we're here for. We don't get that a lot on our jobs. You don't get the victim ID result, but when you do, it's quite powerful. It can be quite impactful and it reminds you that that's what you're actually here for. It's real kids, real names, real faces, real people that no longer have to worry about that in their lives here. It is a challenge sometimes to remind people that these aren't just videos. This is an actual child. This is an actual person somewhere who is not only living with the consequences of what's happened to them, but now also lives with the knowledge that that's been recorded and is now being shared with thousands of strangers around the world every day.
You mentioned before that this case, it began with a tip-off that realistically nowadays would probably fall to the bottom of the pile in terms of priority. Is under-resourcing an issue?
That's always a trap question because everyone knows the answer is yes. Yeah. But the thing is, there is so much that it's not just resourcing that will fix the problem. And we do a lot around trying to be smarter in what we're doing and trying to have better collaboration so that it's not just one agency trying to do something. We can share resources, we can share intelligence, we can better target our own threats better. So a lot of what we've done recently in the last few years has been around being able to do more with what we've got because you could give us 100 more staff and there's still going to be reports that we deprioritise because we just don't have the people to do it.
Can you give me a rough figure of the amount of people you're investigating on, let's say, in a year?
Customs and my team would get probably around about 1,000 reports a year, just industry reports. Not all of them are actionable. A lot of them give us intelligence leads, but not really enough to go and pursue as an investigation. I think this year alone we have arrested 13 people specifically for border-related offending. So that's at least 13 full operations that we've done. We do a lot of other investigations in the background that are more short-lived or end up resulting in something other than arrest for now. It may be that we identify someone and we pick them up later on. There's certainly more work there than we can handle, and that's the same with everyone. I think generally every month we'd be dealing with 50 to 60 reports, or even possibly even up to 100 reports that need some level of investigation. Yeah.
Can you talk me through a case? So it would start with you getting obviously a tip-off from industry. Where do you take it from there?
If it's a report, there's processes that we do to make sure, or we prioritise basically. There's so much work that we actually need to pick what we consider to be the biggest threats. And there's multiple ways we can target it, but ultimately what we're trying to do is identify who's done it and then figure out the best way to address that person. There's a range of different enforcement options we have, but typically for an operation like we've we've talked about the arrests that we've made, that will result in a search warrant at some point where we go to recover the evidence that we believe is there. Yeah, and then if we get the evidence, that person's arrested and we can go through the prosecution.
What are the consequences for these kinds of offenders?
Well, our penalties for our offending, the maximum penalty is 10 years imprisonment. We can also charge another offending, which attracts up to 14 years imprisonment as well. So those are the maximums. It's completely up to the judiciary how that's managed. That's not something we concern ourselves with. But yeah, it's serious offending. By all accounts, what we're dealing with is one of the most serious offences that customs will deal with.
I mean, 10 years, it feels pretty light. Do you think sentences should be tougher?
I think it's a conversation that we are always having. We're always looking at legislation and making sure it's not getting too rigid. 10 years is actually a big sentence in the scheme of things. And again, sentencing is up to the courts. You know, some people will get hefty sentences, some people won't. It's something that I tell my staff, don't get hung up on, because you wouldn't work here very long if that's what you were here for. That's not what we're here for. Our job is to stop the behaviour, do what we can to protect children, whether they're in New Zealand or overseas, from this sort of crime, and then leave it to the nuances of the justice system, because it is very nuanced and complex, to manage how best to deal with what's happened.
There are a range of reasons driving the investigators that are doing this kind of work. Simon says it ultimately comes down to wanting to make a difference.
The type of people that work in this space are motivated to see bad things stop. It's kind of a justice motivation. They see that this is a real problem and they want to do what they can to stop it. And I think that is a necessary drive to do this job. You can't get anyone to do it just because it's a job. People need to be internally motivated to do it.
Does this job have a lifespan? Is there only so long that you can do it for?
It can do. And again, that's a tricky question, because there are some people in the business that we work with in other agencies who have been around for a very long time and they're very effective. And there are others who just call it quits after 3 years. You know, they'll do it for 3 years and that's enough. So again, that's a very individual thing. It's something that we were very mindful of in terms of keeping people safe, is that if the wheels look like they're starting to wobble, then we need to have processes in place to deal with that so that we don't hurt our own staff.
You must place a pretty high priority on mental health in your department. How do you switch off from a job like this? How do you balance that so that you don't reach the breaking point?
Yeah, there's a whole lot behind that. So we start at recruitment. We want to make sure we get the right people in, that they've got the right motivations and that they've got the right resilience to what we're dealing with, and we make sure they understand before day one what it is that we actually do. A lot of people have a bit of a Hollywood idea that we go and kick in doors and pull kids out of basements and things like that. That's not the job. The job is, unfortunately, watching a lot of really horrible material and having to categorise it so that we can prosecute it. I guess you get better at it. So I know when I came in and was a new investigator, it was tough. I still remember a lot from that. But as you get more and more used to it, it becomes easier to compartmentalise and to manage it more as a commodity, which sounds harsh, but I think it's necessary as well. So I think that's how we do it. There's a whole lot of stuff around how we do it well, which comes down to getting the right people, having a really good team environment, a really good culture to support people. That's how we can survive doing it. But how we do it is probably quite an individual thing. The team environment that we build is really important to surviving every day. So what we want is for people to come to work every day because they want to come to work, because it's a nice place to work, despite what we're dealing with. And then I think if we've got all that in place, it makes it easier for people to draw the lines between what's work and what's not. And that's something that all of our staff are encouraged to do through just the interactions that we have, the leadership that we have in the team, and the psych support that we have, the regular psych support that we have, is being able to draw the line and know that when you're at work, and when you're in the car going home, you're not at work anymore. Now, the reality of that is quite different. We have on call, we do have to do things, but we do have some things in place. For instance, you're not allowed to work on material at home.
The National Party is keen to follow Australia's lead and ban children under 16 from using social media.
He's asked the Education Minister, Erica Stanford, to explore options for legislation.
Well, a new survey out this morning has found almost 3/4 of New Zealand adults support a social media ban for under 14s.
There is this push to restrict social media for kids under the age of 16, and in some countries it's been banned, and New Zealand looks to be moving that way. Do you think that would help?
I don't really know enough about how effective that would be. I think we can do better in terms of protecting our kids and our youth online. Whether a blanket ban will be successful, I don't know. I think it's too early to tell, actually, even looking at other countries. But it is something that needs to be considered. Yeah, this is another world that we're letting our kids go into, so we should be exploring what do we need to do to make sure that their world's safe.
It's like the $1 million question, really, but do you see a day where this isn't an issue?
No. I'd love to see a day where it doesn't exist. I think there's always going to be a demand. There is an argument that generative AI may replace a lot of CSAM.
So you're saying that people will opt for fake generated content instead?
Yeah, and I can see how that argument is formed, but I think there's always going to be, and I think there always has been, a cohort of the population who is motivated by the real sexual abuse of children. There always will be. And they don't have to be producing material for that. That's always been a problem throughout history. But we now have the means of producing material in whatever format and sharing it a lot easier than what we had in the past. And I think that's why we're seeing the problem that we're seeing. Personally, I don't think the problem will go away. I think it will change. It will look different. I think in 10 years' time it will be very different. But I think it will always be there.
That's all for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and NZ On Air. This episode was produced by Alexia Russell and engineered by Mark Chesterman. Thank you to Simon Peterson. I'm Davina Zimmer. Ka kite.